We have now the business critical session. We have one operator, we have two industry players, and we have a test and measurement company. You can guess who is that at the end. The operator will start. We are very happy that we have Frank Schmidt-Kuentzel with us. Frank Schmidt-Kuentzel is business owner, Campus Networks at Telefónica Germany Business Solutions. Frank, stage is yours.
Yes, thank you. So, welcome to the afternoon sessions. I'll try to wake you up after lunch a little bit, even if the topic is maybe. We'll see how it goes. So, if we start today, it's about business critical networks. So, usually we're talking about private networks, campus networks, and I'm the first one. So, I was asked also to give a bit of a broader view. What do private 5G, what does it mean for an operator? What is our view on the topic? How to address it, and what is to be taken into account? So, exactly. So, yeah, Telefónica. So, I don't think we need to present Telefónica. Yeah, most of you, we don't need to spend time on that. Part of an international communications group, and in Germany, I think we should see the office from the top floor here. Private networks, when do I need that? What is the advantage of 5G in that context? Of course, own secured network. If you compare it to a public network coverage, to IoT coverage, when do operators need a private network? You want to have an own secured network for your industry data. Of course, 5G makes it future-proof with all the backwards-forward compatibility. The high SLA with complete control per connection. Yeah, I think that's the biggest difference also compared to Wi-Fi. There is a start in Wi-Fi 7 one day to look at single connections in Wi-Fi, but in general, with a listen before you talk, you will never have the same control over the communication that you have with a 5G or 4G or 3G scheduler looking at each particular connection. Yeah, and with 5G, you're able to guarantee the KPIs once you do the settings correctly. And the next thing, uninterrupted quality for moving object. Also there are, of course, handover features in Wi-Fi, but they're more on the level of I throw it over to the next Wi-Fi. It's not really the accompanied 4G, 5G, especially 5G, to help the communication over from one cell to the other without any interruption in the quality and the KPI. So I think these are the, if you want, the two biggest advantages and important things. If you need a really reliable network, you need the quality to stay constant without any hiccups. That's when you talk about a private network in an industry, because a lot of the applications, they work with Wi-Fi. As long as you have best effort, as long as best effort is enough, you can perfectly stay with Wi-Fi. When you start in your digitalization journey to reach a point where you say this cannot fail or this cannot have a hiccup in quality, then this is when you start introducing private networks. And of course, you have different use cases with all the different IoT, ultra reliable, but I don't think we need to talk about 5G technology in this round, so I will skip that a little bit. And of course, indoor and outdoor. Yeah? As soon as you have larger outdoor areas, also for financial reasons with Wi-Fi, you're spending a huge amount of devices that you need to get the same coverage. And when 5G, you just put a bigger antenna. With 3 antennas, you can cover the same outdoor area that you would need 30, 40 Wi-Fi hotspots, Wi-Fi access points for. So that's basically when you start discussing about private networks. And the use cases that we see in that topic there are industry use cases. I choose especially about industry at this point. I will start with the top right, because long-term, the easiest business case for a private network is, of course, when you look at all your AGV fleets. And today, a bit out of despair, all the AGV manufacturers are trying to make it as autonomous as possible because they don't trust the connection. So as autonomous as possible, but that's not the end of the efficiency gain. You need to coordinate them. You need to be able to make them communicate, to trust their communication, to really have efficiency, to have something carrying something more urgent, being able to make its path, to avoid congestions, etc., especially in a bigger logistics hall. If you look at today, they're still following magnetic tracks in many factories and stopping much more often than it would be there. So that's the easiest business case. And of course, on the left bottom side also, when you have when you need to change a factory from time to time. Automotive, they change every 3, 4, 5 years. The millions they spend in new cabling, so that's also a long-term goal, which is a very easy business case to look at gaining flexibility by doing a lot of connections wireless. But actually, when you look at where customers start with a private network, very often they start with a simple business case, which is like remote expert, just medium right, just to be able to have people communicate on the same view, looking at the same thing, having not the expert on site, but having it in another location. So that's a typical business case to start with, just because it's new. The long-term business cases, until you have your AGVs on 5G, this will take 10 years, 15 years. So the things you start with when you have a 5G network is a lot about remote expert. Then, of course, the introduction of AI, which is a big topic for many customers. So to connect to an AI, to have a camera that is connected to an AI engine. Of course, you can put a small AI engine to every of your devices, but that will not be the most cost-efficient solution. So the idea is to have a more centralized AI engine and to have a real-time communication with that. And we will not be able to do all of that by cable. And of course, last thing here, very easy to put in some sensors to observe some machines which have been running strangely lately. Just put a camera, leave it there for a month, and more often than not, you will just find out what was the problem and then move the camera to the next device. So also for the famous predictive maintenance, I know it has been around for 20 years, but there are actually companies really accelerating on that domain, even if it has been sleeping for a long time. So just to have an introduction, what are the typical use cases that we encounter when we talk to customers about private networks? The next thing that I wanted to explain is just a little bit what are the different type of private networks that we discuss with customers that we have in mind when we are as an operator. So the top left or the left one is actually the most typical one. You have a pure isolated network. You put a core network into the customer location. You put radio network into the customer location, and you have your private network set up, purely isolated. That's also what many companies start with because it's easy. You don't have to have outside connections. You just have a very quick chat with your security department and that's it. But long term, that is not necessarily the only architecture model that is interesting. If you look at the right one, you have a centralized core here on the, I don't know if there's a pointer. You have a centralized core here that is not necessarily on the location. So especially for large customers with many sites, it makes sense to have a centralized location for the core and then to have edge cores at the different locations. So especially large companies will look at that point, at that architecture model for the future. And there is two variants. The one that the centralized part belongs to the customer, belongs to the corporation. It's their own isolated network, just a multi-site. And the other one is that actually it's basically maybe a smaller company where we have a cloud core and the customer does not need to pay for the entire core and they just pay for the edge core to have a small private network without having to building an own core at their own location, at all locations. So that's what we call in our case Campus Network Cloud. And then on the left side you see the other extreme, in the isolated, everything was on site. In the slicing campus network, it's just a private part, so a part of the capacity of the public network. So in our case, of the O2 network in Germany, is just cut out, is reserved, is blocked for the private customer. So if they buy 20% of a capacity, then this 20% belongs to the customer, and this is their private network. And of course, you can also virtually then you have the traffic also completely secured, tunneled directly into the customer network. So that's the other extreme with no, let's say, completely owned hardware. And of course, there is intermediate models where you put additional antennas because, of course, I can only sell them 30% capacity if it's left over, if there is spare capacity in the network. And as everybody knows, not everywhere there is spare capacity. So in many cases, I will also put 1 or 2 additional small antennas on site, etc., to enhance the capacity to be able to offer that. And of course, edge core is also possible in this variant. And the last one is hybrid, which is, for many customers, the long-term evolution, because even if you start with an isolated network, you might have a large outdoor area where hybrid has a huge advantage. You have your own core, but you still connect to some public antennas from, for instance, Telefónica, but it could also be Telecom or Vodafone, and you are able to use existing antennas, and you don't have to build all the antennas double for your coverage for public network, for your mobile phones, and for your private network. So that's the hybrid architecture model. So as you see, building an isolated network is okay, but when you need to go with extra antennas into your factory anyway, because the coverage is not good enough, the capacity is not good enough, also these architecture models that allow synergies between public network and private network are more and more important. So these are the different architecture models that we see, and that's why isolated is one option, but there are many other options that are equally important also for the industry. Okay, just a few examples also to see what are the triggers also for customers to invest into a private network today. If you look at the top left, it's quite easy. It's a huge test track. I don't know, 520 hectares. So it's a huge track with a huge area. To cover that with something else than mobile technology is not possible. Therefore, here it was covered with 16 large macro antennas. You have a private network. The requirement was to have the KPIs of these test cars. These are new models that are being tested, and the KPIs needed to come into the systems in absolute real time with no interruptions whatsoever in the KPIs. So that's one thing. The middle part on the top, it's a paper factory. I don't know if you have ever been into a paper factory. This is a huge chemical plant, if you want. One machine for paper is 120 meters long, 15 meters high, and 15 meters wide, and with a lot of tunnels and channels inside. And to have coverage in there, they've tried with Wi-Fi for a long time, didn't work. And for security reasons, they needed to be reachable whenever they work in that machine. So that's why they decided 5G was the most efficient way, and they are now communicating with 5G in that factory. And now, step by step, they're introducing additional use cases by having all the data on, starting to introduce additional also autonomous forklifts, etc., etc. Helios is just to work on 5G, so that's more an R&D use case. That's more typical to look at the future of remote health. Dataport is also to look at a different business model, also for public entities, public security agencies. The middle bottom one is interesting. It's a car manufacturer. It's a car supplier, OEM, that has also a lot of test scenarios. One of them being actually crash tests, and they wanted to do these test scenarios with less cabling, being more flexible, especially if you think of crash tests. To carry a cable behind the car is not really the most efficient thing. So that's, of course, something where reliable connectivity, mobile connectivity is a quite easy business case and a quite easy use case to understand. And the top right is investigation on what we talked before about the AGVs, the next generation of AGVs, the automatic recognition of objects, also in intralogistics, which the TU Munich, the University of Munich, is handling. Okay, well, there are other cases that we could talk about, but here today was just to have an introduction a little bit. What are the important points? And what are the important points? I think from our point of view, we talked about the use cases. These are business critical networks. They cannot fail. So one of the most important points is how to operate these networks. How to make sure these operators, if there is any failure, there is an immediate reaction, and you can immediately reestablish them. And many customers, they start looking at the networks themselves. And if you take one of these more standardized industry, let's say networks like the NDAC that you know from Nokia, or the EP5G and Ericsson, they are quite easy to set up, but they're also limited in flexibility. So there are different types of network being used in the private network. And if there's something failure, you of course need to go deep into all the parameters to really make sure you can reestablish them correctly. And as we said before, if you look at reliability numbers of, I don't know, 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines, apart from redundancy and resilience, and you need to have an operating team that is able to look into a lot of details with a lot of speed and immediately. And that's something that, of course, operators are used to. We have the teams to look deep into the parameters, and that's what we can then put into to the service of the private networks as a value. Yeah. Customers, some of them will build up their own teams, specialized in communication, specialized in 5G, but will they scale this and become a sort of a mobile operator for their private network? Some will, but what we see in the market is not many. Most of them will then rely on operators or other competent partners to manage their private networks. And how do we do that? The one thing is to operate the network itself. The other thing is, what do I have to look at? Just look at the network elements is fine, but you need to also be able to, and we've seen that also outside, to do predictive, let's say, to look at the network before there is a problem. If you have 5 nines in the security SLA, you need to have a full view of everything that happens in the network. And of course, there is the existing equipment, there is the existing monitoring solutions, but there is still more that can be done. And that's why we partnered with Rolle and Schwarz as Telefónica to look also at what else can be done, what can be done in the future. We signed a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with Rolle and Schwarz, to really see how can we become even better and how can we set up more. And what we're talking about here is these advanced service monitoring, advanced monitoring solutions to be able to really look at everything that changes in the network. That can be interference from other frequencies, that can be trends in the network KPIs, that can be interruptions. You've seen outside in what Peter Bush is showing, let's say single packets that don't behave like they should. And the chain of elements that can disrupt quality is important, and you need to look at the entire chain. And that's why we're preparing for that point. Yeah, many customers are not yet there. They're still developing the digitalization use cases. Yeah, as you know, 5G networks, they have had a hype of everybody was expecting them to explode. That has calmed down. When you look at the reality, there's of course a lot of things that you cannot buy all your use cases just off the shelf. So now I think we see the networks becoming more, and we see that taking up in a realistic way, and after the hype has slowed down a little bit. And that's basically what we're preparing for. Yeah, whenever they really go into commercial use of the big use cases of the networks that cannot fail, we will have to help them looking into the network permanently and being able to react in emergency cases. So that's basically why I'm here today also, why we work with Rolle and Schwarz to improve the operations services of such private networks. And I think that was what I wanted to show today. Yeah, there is a link here also. We have a partner page also of Telefónica. So if there's any questions, I'll still be around today and be happy for discussions today or this evening about business critical networks.
Thank you very much, Frank.